Hey fancy people, welcome to That Sci-Fi Show. I'm Jay, and today we talk about the philosophy of Batman and Robin. Nope, not that one, like, just in general. That's better. Let's roll the bump. Today's video is brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. You can see the names of those fancy people at the end of this video and in the description below. But let's talk about Batman, more on Patreon at the end of the video. So Batman, as we've discussed many times before, is a superhero from DC Comics. Artist Bob Kane and writer Bill Finger created the Dark Knight, who debuted in Detective Comics number 27 in 1939. The Caped Crusader is, in reality, Bruce Wayne, Gotham City billionaire, philanthropist, and all-around handsome Randian hero. After witnessing the tragic killing of his parents, Dr. Thomas Wayne and Martha, Batman trains himself, both physically and mentally, and then makes the totally logical decision to dole out street justice and fight petty crime while dressed as a bat. You know, like you do. Robin, on the other hand, could refer to multiple characters within the continuity of DC Comics proper. Bob Kane, Bill Finger, and this time Jerry Robinson created the original Robin, who made his first appearance in Detective Comics number 38 in 1940. The Boy Wonder's backstory shared a lot in common with Batsy. Dick Grayson, an 8-year-old acrobat, loses his family when they're murdered by a mobster that had been extorting money from the circus where they worked. John and Mary Grayson of the Flying Graysons were unaware that their trapeze equipment had been sabotaged, and as a result, they fell to their deaths. After Batman investigated the murder with the help of young Dick Grayson, he used his public identity as Bruce Wayne to gain custody of the young kid. Together, Batman and Robin, often called the Dynamic Duo or the Caped Crusaders, make a formidable team. But is it ethical? Specifically, is it ethical for Batman to train an orphan child to put his life on the line every night to fight crime in a colorful costume? Today, we're turning to Batman and philosophy, the Dark Night of the Soul, for some answers. Those answers are found in Chapter 2, written by James Giovanni, which I'm sure that I did not pronounce correctly, but I'm just going to run with it. Side note, you'll find an affiliate link down below where you can get your own copy of this book and help the channel out just a bit while doing so. And also a shout out to co-editor and Chapter 1 author Mark D. White, who is a friend of the show. And by friend, I mean he puts up with me on Twitter, which is no easy task, just ask Scott. So Batman and Robin and ethics. Is it ethical for Batman to train young boys to be Robin and send them out to fight dangerous criminals? To answer that, we need to understand ethics, the branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles. In the book, Giovanni asked us to suppose that we found an orphan child on the streets. What are the morally acceptable actions that you could take in that situation? You could turn the child over to social services. You could take the child into your home and raise them as your own. But not many people would think that training the child in martial arts and sending him out to fight would be a morally acceptable answer. Yet historically, Giovanni points out, ancient Spartans, medieval royalty, and New Guinean warriors all exposed young boys to potentially lethal danger in the name of helping them grow into young adults. Medieval royalty even dressed the young boys up in capes and symbols, and frankly, that's very Batman-like behavior. But just because people have done things historically, that doesn't mean that those actions are ethical. I hear you yelling at your phone while you drink your Monster Energy drink and briefly consider watching a different video. That's right. I can see you, Steve. That is correct, however. An action isn't automatically ethical just because it's traditional. So, How do we judge what is and what is not ethical? Well, ethics, D. Giovanni says, could be defined as the attempt to live by a set of duties where it's necessary to follow some of these rules or act on some of these duties regardless of the consequences, simply because the duty itself is most important. This is called deontological ethics, from the Greek word deon, meaning duty. Regular viewers of the show will recognize the concept of deontology from previous videos like this one about Spider-Man. In the eyes of German philosopher Immanuel Kant, the most important duties must be universal and categorical, meaning without exception. In other words, you can't pick and choose. For example, if you believe there's an important ethical duty not to tell lies, as many people do, then you can't cherry pick certain times when lying is okay. If never telling a lie is an important ethical duty, then there are no exceptions. D. Giovanni asked us to imagine that Batman has been captured by the Joker. If the Joker asked where Robin is, then Batman can refuse to answer or dodge the question, but he cannot lie about Robin's location, even if it leads the Joker into a trap and therefore saves time, money, and lives. If the duty to not lie is universal, then it applies to everyone, including the Batman. And if it's categorical, then it applies to all situations all the time, including this one. To quote Kant directly, act only in accordance with that maxiom, through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. And what Kant is saying here is that to find out if a given act is ethical, we must ask ourselves, what if everyone always acted this way all the time? In our example, we ask, what if everyone lied? To put it mildly, that would be bad, and so lying must be bad, regardless of whether or not the consequences are good and bad. Kant argues that if your maxiom doesn't universalize in this way, then it cannot be ethical. So, is training a young Robin ethical? Well, what if everyone trained a young boy to fight crime in a costume? It sounds like chaos and a dangerous situation for everyone. Therefore, under deontological ethics, Batman has acted unethically in training Robin. But that's stupid, Jay, you say as you get your damn Cheetos dust all over the place. Well, hang on, Steve, I'm not done. D. Giovanni is quick to point out that maxioms are rarely this specific. If Batman himself were to attempt this same exercise, then he might come up with, do anything you can to help orphans. And that sounds a lot more reasonable and much more universal. But what about do anything you can to help orphans while protecting their personal safety? That seems even more reasonable and universal. And if you've ever heard of Jason Todd, then you know that Batman doesn't always succeed in the safety department. I think there's a good case to conclude that, according to deontological ethics, training Robin is in fact unethical. However, it's far, far from the only way to look at the situation. Take a moment to do the ethical thing and click that like button, and then we'll move on to Consequentialist Ethics. Up until this point, we've been considering the ethics of an action without regard to its consequences. But in consequentialist ethics, it's considered to be the most important part. Consequentialism holds that the consequences of one's conduct are the ultimate basis for any judgment about the rightness or the wrongness of that conduct. Utilitarians like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mills would argue that an action is good if its consequences are good. So what is utilitarianism? No one who's ever watched my content ever asked, because I talk about it way too much. Well, utilitarianism states that the best action is the one that maximizes utility, basically the well-being of sentient entities. Jerry Bentham described utility as the sum of all pleasure that results from an action minus the suffering of anyone involved in the action. So do the consequences of training Robin and sending him out to fight crime result in more good than it does harm? This is more complicated than it sounds because we have to consider every variable. How does it affect Robin physically and mentally? How does it affect the people of Gotham, or the crime rate, or the cost of repairs? And the list goes on and on. This could be debated indefinitely from either side, but if you're one of those people that believes that the very existence of Batman and Robin leads to the existence of the Joker and the rest of Batman's rogues galleries, well, you're very likely to believe that not only is training Robin unethical, but being Batman is also unethical. On the other hand, if you believe that Batman saves the city and sometimes even the whole world, then you're much more likely to decide that being Batman and training Robin aren't just ethical, but absolutely necessary. Let's talk about it in the comments section below. How do you think we should judge Batman's decision to create Robin? Should we judge Batman based on the consequences of his actions? Or should we judge him based on the actions themselves? Join me in a couple of days for part 2, where we explore the concept of virtue ethics and discuss the idea that sometimes even the best of intentions can produce a morally unethical outcome. That sounds fun. But you know what is fun? Hitting the like button. Give it a try. It's a blast. Now, as promised, let's talk about Patreon. As a test, we rolled out 2 levels of support, $1 and $5. And we were delighted to get 8 pledges totaling $25 a month. And while that doesn't sound like much, it's a whole lot more than the none that I expected. The $1 a month pledge gets a one-time free gift, something mailed to your house that you can actually hold in your hand. Meanwhile, the $5 pledge gets you a small Loot Crate-style box sent to your home once a month. You still have until Monday to pledge and get rewards for this month. Click the link in the comment section below to learn more about each level and exactly what the prizes are. But I'll give you a hint. The $5 prize gets a spaceship. So, if you can afford it, join us on Patreon, and if not, that's okay. Share the videos, click the like button, and enjoy the channel's Discord server free of charge. That link is also in the description below, and I will see you guys there personally. Whew, this has been a long one, but that's all I have for you guys today. Until next time, I'm still Jay Parks.